In the scorching deserts of Egypt, where time seems to have stopped, there are blocks of stone stacked on top of each other, so perfectly that you can't even pass a thin blade through the gaps. Those blocks weighing tens of tons were transported from hundreds of kilometers away, stacked into giant pyramids. But how? No cranes, no wheels, no steel, no lasers, no modern technology. Only one question remains. Is there anything that history hasn't told us? Relax your body, close your eyes if you want, and go back thousands of years with me to hear the hypotheses, the controversies, and the mysteries that have never been solved. We will start from the first stones, from the hands of the unknown craftsman, and listen to the whispers of the pyramids in the mysterious Egyptian night. Imagine standing at the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It rises nearly 140 meters high, with millions of stone blocks stacked upon one another as if defying gravity. Now, imagine trying to lift each multi-ton block to that towering summit without cranes, without wheels, without steel, without drones, without AI. Did the ancient Egyptians possess some lost technology? Or were they simply far more ingenious than we assume? In this journey, we will unravel the real methods used to raise stones skyward, from dense ramp systems and primitive levers to modern 3D spiral models, to finally understand how they moved stone into the sky. Part 1. Giza, the dragon asleep in the desert, and wraps around the pale yellow stones of one of the greatest structures mankind ever created. As the first rays of morning sunlight rise from the east, soft light slithers across the Egyptian desert. This is the Pyramid of Khufu, also known as the Great Pyramid of Giza. Standing at approximately 146.6 meters tall upon completion, Giza held the title of the tallest human-made structure in the world for nearly 4,000 years, until Lincoln Cathedral in England was built in the 14th century. To put that into perspective, it is roughly equivalent to a modern 48-story building or twice the height of the Statue of Liberty if you were to stack them upright. This structure is not a single solid mass. It is composed of around 2.3 million individual blocks, each weighing between 2 and 2.5 tons on average. Some special blocks, like the granite slabs in the King's Chamber, can weigh up to 70 or even 80 tons, equal to the weight of a modern battle tank. And all those massive stones were placed exactly where they needed to be in just 20 to 25 years. No digital tools, nothing but wood, rope, manpower, and the intellect of ancient humans. No cranes, no steel, no concrete. In modern conditions, if you hired a construction team to assemble 2.3 million stones in 25 years, they would need to set nearly 255 stones every single day, without weekends, for more than 2 decades. And that's just the basic structure. The bigger question remains. How did they not only move the stones across great distances, but also lift them upward? Was there a massive ramp system? A forgotten pulling machine? Or was it a construction intelligence that we are only beginning to grasp? Let us continue the journey to hear the whispers of stone and uncover the secrets Giza has kept for more than 4,500 years. Part 2. No cranes. Only wisdom. Close your eyes and picture ancient Egypt over 4,000 years ago. You might see small human figures walking under the early sun, between pale skies and endless desert. They had no cranes, no trucks, not even a single wheel to rely on. And yet, day after day, block after block still made its way upward, as if the stones themselves climbed to the top of the pyramid. So how did they do it? Sloped ramps, a simple yet genius solution. The most frequently mentioned method through the centuries is the use of temporary ramps made from earth and stone. These ramps were built up as needed and removed once the construction was complete. Some suggest a straight ramp stretched from the ground all the way to the top, like a bridge between earth and sky. Others propose a spiral ramp coiling around the pyramid like a golden ribbon winding up a mountain of stone. According to researchers, to achieve the ideal incline, typically between 7 and 10 degrees, gentle enough for workers to avoid slipping, such a ramp would need to be at least 1,000 meters long. Along that length, hundreds of workers would pull in unison, chanting together and pouring water over the sand to reduce friction. Among modern theories, one of the most intriguing ideas comes from French engineer Jean-Pierre Houdin. He suggests that instead of external ramps, the Egyptians constructed an internal spiral ramp inside the body of the pyramid. Each level was gradually raised using levers, pulling stones in a circular path within, an efficient method that also preserved the outer surface while it was being completed. Levers, wooden sleds, and ropes, the silent tools. There was no need for complex machines. Sometimes all they needed was a long wooden stick, a flat stone base, and coordinated human hands. Simple levers lifted massive blocks little by little, placing them precisely like a colossal puzzle in the desert. Wooden sleds, lubricated with water or vegetable oil, became the wheel-less forklifts of the ancient world. Ropes were woven from palm fibers, tough enough to withstand great tension without snapping. Every single tool, no matter how small, carried the marks of patience and craftsmanship. No engines, only the wind and the heartbeat. There was no sound of machines. Only the wind brushing against stone walls, the footsteps pressing into the ground, the tightening of ropes with each pull, and the rhythmic songs of a leader setting the pace. Everything moved like a living machine, needing no oil, only breath, belief, and the unity of thousands of people. They did not build with steel. They built with willpower and togetherness, a material that no time can erode. And still, the stones continued to rise, silently pledging themselves to eternity. Part 3: Angles, Gravity, and Human Strength, balancing the world with bare hands. You might not see it with your eyes, but there is something that never sleeps in every structure. That is gravity, the invisible force that gently pulls everything back toward Mother Earth. And in ancient Egypt, where multi-ton stones had to climb toward the sky, gravity was the silent enemy that Egyptians learned to live with and eventually overcome. Inclined angles, a simple concept that changes everything according to modern physics. For a group of people to pull a heavy object up a ramp without collapsing from exhaustion, the ideal incline must fall between 7 and 10 degrees. If the slope is too shallow, the ramp would stretch for kilometers. If too steep, the pulling force would multiply drastically. A 10-degree ramp reaching the top of a pyramid 140 meters tall would need to be more than 800 meters long, nearly the length of 10 football fields end to end. Just building such a ramp was a massive project on its own. That is why Egyptians may have used spiral ramps wrapping around the pyramid. Each loop reduced the climbing height gradually, like giant stair steps flattened into a path. Pulling force. When humans become living levers, a 2.5-ton block, sliding on dry sand, would require more than 50 people to pull it. But if the sand is moistened with water, as shown in tomb paintings, the friction drops significantly. In 2014, physicists at the University of Amsterdam recreated this experiment. They proved that with properly dampened sand, the pulling force could be reduced by up to 50%. That means half the number of workers could get the job done. No wheels were needed. No advanced technology. Just by understanding the ground beneath their feet, the Egyptians found a way to turn even the dry sand into a powerful ally. Levers, sleds, and strength. Slow and steady precision. If pulling up a steep slope was too difficult, they lifted the stones bit by bit using long wooden levers supported by smaller stones. It was like a slow-motion upgrade system, deliberate, persistent, and methodical. A 2-meter-long wooden lever, placed on the right fulcrum, could lift objects 10 times heavier than human strength alone. Combined with wooden sleds and tightly braided ropes, they did not carry the stones. They pulled them, like leading water back into the fields. Each movement, small, patient, and continuous, was a symphony of physics and humanity echoing across the endless desert. A world without steel, only the knowledge of nature's rules, no gears turned, no engines roared, only people who understood that if you cannot fight gravity, then you must walk with it. If you cannot make the stone lighter, then make the path longer, the sand slicker, the slope gentler. And if you cannot do it alone, then call upon hundreds of others. Sing together, pull together, until the massive block settles quietly in its destined place, as if it was born to be there. Part 4. Modern 3D Models. When science touches ancient stone, more than 4,500 years ago, the ancient Egyptians built the Great Pyramid of Giza without leaving behind a single blueprint. No paper, no sketches, no written explanation. Only massive stones stacked together, silent and unchanging. But today, the modern world, with lasers, wall-penetrating radar, and 3D software, has begun to whisper to Giza, like decoding an unfinished poem carved in time. Radar and voids, hidden corridors no one had seen. In the year 2000, a team of engineers and archaeologists began using particle detection technology called muon tomography. This technique scans through solid rock using cosmic particles, much like an X-ray for an entire pyramid. The results were astonishing. They discovered vast voids and chambers hidden inside the pyramid. These spaces had no known entrance and were not mentioned in any ancient texts. Some of these voids were arranged around the central axis of the pyramid, as if wrapping around its core. It was like a spiral path hidden within the stone, silently nourishing the heart of the colossal monument. Jean-Pierre Houdin and the ramp concealed in stone. Based on these findings, a French engineer named Jean-Pierre Houdin proposed a bold theory. He believed the Egyptians did not pull the stones up the outside of the pyramid, but instead pulled them up from the inside. According to him, the Egyptians first built the pyramid's inner core. Then they created an internal spiral ramp, wide enough to pull the stones upward, rising with each level. As each stone was pulled up, a new corridor was built around it, a hidden road, dark and quiet, but perfectly functional. Using 3D simulation software, Houdin reconstructed the entire structure. When compared with the radar data, every detail matched with astonishing precision. Modern technology is having a conversation with the ancient world. What is truly fascinating is that when the software was created, no one imagined it would be used to decode a pyramid. Yet now, what the ancient builders did not write on paper, they etched into stone. And modern science is learning to listen to that language. Every stone cut, every sealed corridor, every misalignment of a few millimeters, all of it is being fed into digital reconstructions, allowing us to step inside the pyramid without removing a single block. A whisper from the future, sent to the past. As you sit in the dark, watching a slow-spinning 3D model of the pyramid on a glowing screen, there is a moment when time itself feels irrelevant. Only the ancient and the modern remain one group built. The other understands, and perhaps that is why Giza still stands. Not just because it was made of stone, but because it connects two worlds through patience and curiosity. Part 5. They had nitrogen monoxide machines, but they had something stronger. When you stand in the endless sands of Giza and look up at those silent stones that have rested there for over 45 centuries, you begin to understand. This is not just a structure. It is a quiet declaration of what humans can do when faced with limits. They had no steel, but they had stone, rope, and levers. They had no engines, but they had human strength groups of pullers, teams of lifters, steady footsteps marching under the noonday sun. They had no magic, but they had mathematics, careful measurements, observations of the stars, and a level of precision we still cannot fully grasp with the naked eye. They had no cranes, but they had vision and willpower, a collective will that needed no words, a vision that reached beyond this life, because they believed what they built today was meant for the next world, For the divine, for eternity. They were not building for themselves. They were building for the gods, and they did it all with bare hands. Giza does not speak through words. It speaks through silence. Silence, like the sound of stone calling out to each new generation's silence. Like the steady breath of a construction site now asleep for thousands of years. And in that silence, if you listen closely, you may hear an echo from the past. We did not fly into the sky, but we pulled the sky down to the earth. Perhaps the greatest achievement of the pyramid is not its height, but its belief. The belief that when people are patient, when they are united, when they dream beyond their small lives, they can place stone upon stone until they reach eternity. Part 6. Spiritual Power and Faith in Stone in the Ancient World. There was no clear line between labor and belief, between work and ritual. To the Egyptians, every pull of the rope, every placement of stone, every fiber sliding through a calloused hand was an act of devotion, not merely construction, but service to the divine. To live was to prepare for death, and death was not an end, but a continuation. The Egyptians did not see death as a final farewell. They believed in the afterlife, a realm where the soul would journey through the gates of Osiris to live on in immortality. If judged worthy, that is why pyramids were not just tombs. They were maps of the soul. They were sacred boats that carried the king to the eternal world. Each stone was a prayer, each rising layer a step toward the light, and every worker, though unnamed, helped write a stone hymn that would last forever. Their sacrifice was not out of fear, but faith. Not all were forced. Modern scholars now agree that many pyramid builders were seasonal workers who labored willingly for honor and belief. They were well fed. They were buried with dignity. And on their graves, archaeologists found inscriptions calling them friends of the pharaoh. To build for the gods was to build for themselves. To place a single stone in that sacred place was to place their name in eternity. Giza is not just a physical monument. It is a sacred hymn carved in stone, a hymn that lasted 20 years, sung by tens of thousands, not with sound, but with sweat, with tears, and with unshakable belief in every layer of rock. We can still feel pain, pride, and the longing to reach beyond human limits. Maybe they never asked, how do we build this? But instead, what can I give? And the answer is still standing quiet, proud, eternal, like the devotion of a civilization sent skyward. Final part, between sand and eternity. Some things never fade, even after thousands of years. The Great Pyramid of Giza is one of them, not just because it is massive or enduring, but because within each stone we still see traces of humanity. Not superhumans, not aliens, but real people of flesh and bone, of faith and patience. They had no cranes, no advanced technology, but they had something that even we sometimes forget today. Perseverance guided by a purpose beyond themselves. Giza is not a miracle. It is proof of the wonders humans can achieve when they are united, when they understand nature, and when they dare to live for something greater than themselves. And so, amid the golden sands, beneath the harsh sun and desert winds, a dream made of stone rose to the sky, and it has never fallen. Thank you for listening. If your eyes are now closed in the dark, and you imagine yourself standing in the Egyptian desert, then smile, because maybe you too are walking the path of the ancient Giza workers, a path with no machines, only belief. Can you imagine a stone block weighing 50 cars being transported 4,000 years ago without modern machinery? Yet the ancient Egyptians transported stone blocks weighing up to 100 tons, some even up to 120 tons, hundreds of kilometers, to build temples, tombs, and pyramids. No cranes, no steel, no wheels. Is this a lost technique, an extraterrestrial intervention, or simply an unrecognized pinnacle of ancient wisdom? Part 1. The impossible stones. Imagine standing in front of a stone block 5 meters long, 2 meters wide, 2 meters high. Its surface is smooth. The Egyptian sunlight makes it glow red gold. You reach out to touch it, and all you feel is helplessness. It weighs 100 tons, equivalent to 50 Toyota Camrys combined. And then you wonder, where did the ancients get it here? And how? But the truly amazing stories lie in the less noticed structures, such as 1.1, more than just the pyramids. When it comes to ancient Egypt, most people think of the Great Pyramid of Giza and its 2 to 3 ton blocks stacked on top of each other. The Ramesseum Temple, home to a 9-meter tall, 83 to 90 ton colossal statue of Pharaoh Ramses II, made of red granite, transported more than 200 kilometers from Aswan. The Assyrian temple at Abydos contains 100 to 120 ton blocks of stone, stacked in a lock style with only a few millimeters between them, no mortar, no glue, and still standing after more than 3,000 years. The pillars of Luxor Temple, 20-meter-high stone blocks standing upright, each weighing tens of tons, carved in detail from top to bottom. In the dry desert of Giza, under the scorching sun of Egypt, hundreds of thousands of giant stones were stacked perfectly to build the Great Pyramids. With their bare hands, they were not soft limestone, but the hardest stone of that time. As a researcher of ancient history, I have asked myself many times, how could they do this without machines? And what surprised me equally was, why did they do it? How to dig, cut, move, and install a 100-ton stone block without a crane, without wheels, without concrete or steel? How did they transport the stone hundreds of kilometers, across rivers, across deserts, and then lift it up high and place it in the perfect position? We today need hydraulic cranes, 300-ton cranes, or heavy transport ships, but the Egyptians did it all. It is no surprise that mystical theories have existed for hundreds of years. But the ancient Egyptians did it with wood, rope, human strength, and intelligence that we have never fully appreciated. On the contrary, I believe that it is ancient intelligence, practical, resilient, and creative, that we should learn from. But the way our ancient ancestors were able to tame nature, using force, terrain, water currents, and even the rhythm of labor. Erich von Däniken, in his book Chariots of the Gods, claimed that aliens helped build structures using anti-gravity technology. Some unorthodox scholars believe that the Egyptians mastered the technique of sonic stone levitation using resonant frequencies to make the stone levitate. There is also a theory that the magicians of the Pharaoh era could command the stone to move using curses, rituals, or the will of the god Osiris. These theories have spread, appearing in movies, comics, games, and have had a significant impact on public perception, leading many to believe that the Egyptians could not have done these things on their own. But history doesn't need magic. It needs evidence, and more evidence is being unearthed. But the Egyptians had no such option. In the modern age, to move a 100-ton stone, we need special heavy trucks, hydraulic cranes, concrete roads, and skilled technicians. It may have taken them years to move each block into place, but the result is a structure that has lasted for more than 4,500 years, using specialized wooden moats. So I don't believe in alien theories. They belittle human achievements. The problem is not the mass, but the belief of modern people. What overwhelms us is not just the weight of the blocks. So before coming to practical solutions, such as flat-bottomed boats, steep slopes, and human power, let's admit one thing. It is our contempt for the ancients that makes us seek the divine instead of the truth. Recent discoveries from Wadi al-Jarf and the Diary of the Official, Mirror, considered the oldest administrative document in the world, have revealed that limestone blocks were moved through a system of artificial canals connected to the Nile. However, granite from Aswan is different. It cannot be transported all by boat. Many researchers believe that the Egyptians transported part of the stone by river, then used an inclined ramp to drag it up to the Giza highlands. Some experimental tests showed that pouring water on sand reduced friction by up to 50%, allowing heavy blocks of stone to be pulled by wooden sledges with 20 to 40 people. When faced with a 100-ton block of stone, roughly equivalent to the weight of a Boeing 757 aircraft, it is easy to fall back on mythical tales. They had only rudimentary tools, but they had faith, organizational skills, and time. Part 2. Modern mistakes and conspiracy theories fascination. Ever since the first Europeans saw the Great Pyramid of Giza, they couldn't believe that a civilization more than 4,500 years ago could move blocks of stone weighing up to 100 tons, without wheels, without steel, without cranes. And from there, false modern hypotheses and bizarre conspiracy theories began to appear. Mistake 1. Tortured slaves built the pyramids, but modern archaeology completely refutes this. One of the most popular ideas, reinforced by Hollywood, is that the pyramids were built by thousands of slaves, beaten and worked to death. Excavations in 1990 by Zahi Hawass and Mark Lenner at Giza discovered a workers' cemetery, carefully buried with bread, beer, and offerings. In fact, the motivation for building the pyramids was more likely strong religious beliefs and collective pride. This suggests they were skilled, respected workers, not slaves. The argument: it was impossible for the Egyptians to move 100-ton blocks of stone with their bare hands, so extraterrestrials must have helped. Verdict: this misconception reflects a Western stereotype that ancient societies could not have built great civilizations without violence. Conspiracy Theory 1. Aliens built the pyramids. This is perhaps the most popular conspiracy theory worldwide. The History Channel's Ancient Aliens program once claimed that the complex corridors inside the pyramids and their precision were too perfect to have been built by humans. Scientific rebuttal: they cite the limestone, granite structures and chambers as evidence of ancient technological design. There is no archaeological evidence, no technological fragments, no images of aliens in ancient Egyptian paintings. It is the small errors, the hammer marks in the blocks, that clearly show that they are the result of human labor, not advanced machines. Verdict: the alien theory is culturally offensive because it denies the capabilities of the ancient Egyptians, who had a superior science, mathematics, and social organization at that time. We are so obsessed with electricity and frequencies that we assume that the past must be like us. Conspiracy Theory 2. The pyramids are ancient energy generators. Some people believe that the pyramids are not tombs, but cosmic energy generators or Earth frequency resonance systems. Counterargument: ancient Egyptian documents and symbols do not mention any uses other than spiritual and funerary purposes. There are no artifacts or ruins that show that the pyramids ever generated energy. Comment: this is a type of speculation that crams modern thinking into the past. The value of refuting conspiracy theories. Instead of making the pyramids more mysterious, refuting conspiracy theories makes this work even more amazing. Not because of science fiction technology, but because they did extraordinary things with only levers, pulleys, ramps, and organized labor. They made the most of human and natural power, accurately calculated the position of the sun, materials, tilt, wind direction. Part 3. Possible solutions. How did the ancient Egyptians do it? After eliminating the fanciful and unsubstantiated theories, we return to what is reasonable and verifiable by modern science, archaeology, and experimentation. Here are the most feasible methods proposed by researchers and archaeological engineers. 1. Using pulleys, levers, and human power, not far-fetched. The ancient Egyptians did not have wheels at the time of the construction of the Giza pyramids, but they were proficient in using primitive levers and pulleys. Hardwood levers can help raise the tops of blocks to place rolling pads or adjust their position. Organized human power. According to research by Professor Dieter Arnold, a group of about 20 to 40 people can pull a 2 to 3 ton block of stone if the surface is slippery. With 100 tons, the number of people would have to increase exponentially or combine with additional tools. What makes the miracle is not a miracle, but an extremely systematic organization, similar to the way the Romans later organized the construction of bridges, or the Chinese built the Great Wall. 2. Wetting the sand. Tips to solve the problem of resistance. Notably, there is a person in front pouring water on the sand. A mural at the tomb of Jotutip depicts a group of people pulling a giant statue on a sled. According to a 2014 study by the University of Amsterdam, wetting the sand will reduce sliding friction by up to 50%, making it much easier to pull heavy objects. Computer simulations show that pouring the right amount of water causes the sand particles to stick together, creating a surface similar to ice skating. This is very convincing evidence because it comes from original Egyptian paintings combined with modern physical analysis. 3. Using ramps, architecture combined with mechanics. The method of building inclined ramps with earth, rubble, or mud is the most popular and also the most feasible theory. Straight ramp in front. A long ramp leading straight to the pyramid face, but takes up a lot of space. Spiral ramp around the pyramid. Saves space, but is difficult to build stably. Side ramp combined with wooden crane. Some blocks can be pulled to a certain height, and use levers and rollers to move to the next level. Archaeological evidence. Archaeologists in Hatnub discovered a system of stone ramps with grooves on both sides, used to place pull poles, helping to reduce the force needed to pull the blocks down the mine. This ramp dates to the time of King Khufu. Heavy blocks of stone from the Tura and Aswan quarries could be transported by flat-bottomed boats when the water was high. Building ramps was no simple idea. It required organization, planning, and extremely sophisticated material engineering, which the Egyptians were well versed in. 4. The Nile, the green highway of the ancients. The Nile was not only a source of life, but also a major transportation route. Many paintings show large boats carrying huge stones along the river. The result: the project was entirely feasible with organized human effort. Pierre Tallet's research found the Wadi al-Jarf papyrus, a document recording the journey of the pyramid building stones through the canal leading to the Nile. The maximum exploitation of the Nile is a testament to strategic intelligence. They not only built the pyramids, but designed the entire national logistics system around it. 5. Modern experiments evidence revisited. Mark Lenner and his team built a miniature pyramid using bronze tools, levers, sledges, and ramps. Frank Monnier and Jean-Pierre Houdin's 3D model of the spiral ramps inside the pyramid to transport stones may explain why no large ramps were found outside the structure. These experiments not only reinforced old theories, but also suggested a new direction for ancient civil engineering research, opening a new chapter in experimental archaeology. No aliens needed, just Egyptians. There is no evidence of supernatural or extraterrestrial technology. It was all an extraordinary human effort with strategic minds, basic tools, and great community organization. They didn't just build pyramids. They built entire civilizations to do it. Part 4. The Nile, the lifeline of 100-ton blocks under the blazing sun of ancient Egypt. There was a river that not only fed people, but also nurtured the dream of building pyramids. That was the Nile, a waterway thousands of kilometers long that played a key role in transporting giant stone blocks from remote quarries to the Giza construction site. But how did the Egyptians do it? Surprisingly, Aswan is located in a rugged, uneven terrain. 1. From quarry to river. The challenging first step, the most striking evidence, is the painting at the tomb of Jotutiti, depicting more than 170 people pulling a large stone statue on a sledge. Some of the 100-ton blocks were quarried from the Aswan quarry, more than 800 kilometers south of the Giza pyramids. To move these stones to the riverbank, The Egyptians used large wooden sledges, lubricated with water or grease to reduce friction. Slopes were made of rammed earth, sometimes covered with wood, to reduce friction. The construction of temporary routes parallel to the Nile was entirely feasible, especially given the high level of organization of ancient Egypt. 2. Giant stone boats, myth or reality? One of the most intriguing mysteries is the Egyptians' use of large wooden boats to transport super-heavy stone blocks along the Nile. Archaeological documents from the time of Senusret III show boats up to 60 meters long, built from Lebanese cedar. However, the excess weight is still a problem. The carving at Deir el-Bahari depicts a fleet of boats carrying giant obelisks, each with 30 to 40 oarsmen. An ancient boat found near the Khufu Pyramid, over 43 meters long, shows highly advanced shipbuilding techniques. Transporting 100-ton blocks of stone by river is possible, especially during the flood season when the water level rises, making the boat float more easily. 3. Dike technique to bring stones to the construction site. In the Giza area, scholars have proposed that the Egyptians dug canals and built temporary dikes to divert river water near the construction site. Egyptologist Mark Lenner and his team have discovered traces of ancient docks and canal systems near the base of the pyramid. Based on geological and radar models, they suggest that the large blocks may have been floated down a channel to the construction site and then brought up by the ramp. This is an extremely convincing discovery, explaining why such heavy blocks could be present regularly in thousands in Giza, an area far from the source of stone. Combining ingenious canals, high-tech boats, and efficient manpower, the ancient Egyptians achieved the seemingly impossible, moving 100-ton stones hundreds of kilometers without modern machinery. 4. Difficulties and practical limitations. Although the waterway system plays a very important role, the reality is that not all blocks can be transported by river, especially the super-large blocks used for temples or statues. The shallowness and depth of the river change with the seasons, requiring precise calculations of the time of transportation. Some sections of the road had to be combined with manual transportation by people in sledges after reaching the shore. It can be seen that the Nile River is not only a source of life, but also a logistical backbone in the greatest construction project of mankind. Part 5. Organization, personnel, and the truth about slaves to build the pyramids. Did the Egyptians really use tens of thousands of slaves to build the pyramids? This is one of the most common misconceptions when it comes to pyramid construction. The image has appeared in many Hollywood movies, where long lines of slaves are forced to work, being beaten, dragging stones in despair under the scorching sun. The truth about the labor force to build the pyramids. But is that the historical truth? However, modern archaeological discoveries have completely shaken that argument. Centuries ago, the historian Herodotus wrote that the Great Pyramid of Giza was built by 100,000 slaves, working continuously for 20 years. Archaeological evidence from Giza. In 1990, a cemetery for pyramid builders was discovered right next to the Giza area. The remains show that they were not slaves. The bones did not show signs of torture or hard labor. They were buried carefully, with beef and fish in their graves, something reserved for the upper class in society. Chemical analysis of their teeth and bones showed that they were local Egyptians, not prisoners of war or foreigners. This proves that the construction force was a well-organized, professional, and somewhat respected labor force. 2. Extremely organized and modern labor organization. Experts now believe that the Giza complex could have been built by about 20,000 to 25,000 specialized workers, working in shifts and divided into specific teams. Organizational structure. The big gangs consisted of 2,000 people, is divided into 4 small gangs. The gangs were given interesting names such as Friends of Khufu or Power-Crazed People. Each gang had engineers, stonemasons, masons, cooks, doctors, and logistics people. This was not a slave organization, but more like a modern construction company with management, engineering, operations, and healthcare levels. 3. Workers' treatment and life. The workers were fed bread, meat, onions, garlic, and beer, nutritious foods at that time. Many records and engravings show that the workers had regular rest periods and did not work during the flood season. They even had a primitive medical system, including bone setters, healers, and people who treated injuries from construction accidents. This is clear evidence that the ancient Egyptians did not build the pyramids out of slavery, but out of ingenious organization and respect for the gods. But there is no evidence that they built the pyramids, as the pyramids predate that time by centuries. 4. Why is the slave-building pyramid myth so popular? It was they, not slaves, who carried the 100-ton blocks of stone, stacked on top of each other to form one of the 7 greatest wonders of mankind. Hollywood movies create memorable, appealing images for viewers, but lack evidence. The 19th-20th century, Western view of non-European civilizations as barbaric and brutal. Confusion with Judaism. The Bible describes the Jews as being enslaved in Egypt. The pyramids were not symbols of oppression, but the achievements of a highly organized society with skilled, trained, and respected workers. When standing in front of the majestic pyramids in the Giza Desert, it is easy to be fascinated by the beauty and wonder of the structure that has stood unshaken for thousands of years. But what makes me, like many other archaeologists, engineers, and historians, admire is not only the enormous scale, but also the subtle combination of simple science, creative engineering, community spirit, and strong faith. And perfect coordination with nature are not miracles or supernatural technology. The blocks of stone weighing up to 100 tons, transported from hundreds of kilometers away by human power, primitive tools. They are the result of a civilization that knows how to take advantage of resources from the Nile River, sand, water, wood, to organized labor and sacred beliefs. We see in the pyramids not only a construction, but also the perseverance and endless creativity of humans, the spirit of cooperation and the power of common belief, respect and understanding of nature, skillfully applied. Thanks to all these factors, seemingly impossible blocks of stone have become immortal symbols of humanity. In this technological age, when we have sophisticated machines and automatic robots, remember that the greatest things come not only from technology, but also from the will, intelligence, and spirit of human solidarity. The pyramids of Giza are proof that with faith and creativity, humans can overcome seemingly impossible limits. In the world, there is only one structure that has lasted for 4,500 years. No iron, no steel, no cranes. And yet they built the Great Pyramid of Giza to 140 meters high, weighing 6 million tons. The question is, where did they get the stones when the desert was full of sand and wind? How did they cut stones as hard as iron with copper and bare hands? And most importantly, who came up with the idea of lifting blocks of stone weighing tens of tons into the sky? For thousands of years, people have found all kinds of reasons. Gods, miracles, even aliens. But tonight, we will not talk about miracles. We will talk about the miracles coming from human hands. Part 1. Mysterious quarries and the journey across the Nile. Imagine standing in front of a giant block of stone, twice the size of a car, weighing tens of tons, cold as metal, and so hard that nothing can cut through it with bare hands. That is granite, the type of stone used by the ancient Egyptians to build burial chambers inside the pyramids and giant statues that have defied time. Granite is not like soft limestone. It is an igneous rock, crystallized deep in the earth. It is 5 times harder than modern concrete. Yet more than 4,000 years ago, the Egyptians knew how to cut, shape, and move these granite blocks from the quarries of Aswan, nearly 800 kilometers south of Giza. As the sun sets, imagine a group of more than 1,000 men, tanned, muscular men, wielding copper axes, hemp ropes, and bare feet stepping on hot stone. They chisel the stone not with machines, but with harder stones, quartz, to create grooves that wear over time, one by one, day by day, like embroidery on the stone. Each block of stone can take weeks, sometimes months, to be removed. And then the great journey begins. The Egyptians did not drag the stone across the desert. They waited for the flood season, when the Nile River rose, and ingeniously built canals, wooden piers, and rammed earth slides to move the stone from the quarry to the boat. But how could a stone weighing tens of tons be transported in a wooden boat? They built giant boats up to 30 meters long, with a hull made of cedar imported from Lebanon, with a wide and flat floor. The stone was placed in the middle of the boat, tied tightly with large hemp ropes. The boat could carry one stone at a time, and needed about 50 to 80 people to row along the Nile. The entire journey from Aswan to Giza lasted for weeks, even months. They followed the water, slept on the boat, ate dry bread, drank light sour beer, and lit oil lamps at night. Under the moonlight, the boat with a large black stone in the middle looked like a holy procession, quietly passing through history. And when the boat reached Giza, it was not the end, but only the beginning of a more fierce journey, lifting the stone hundreds of meters high, stacking it without glue, using only faith, precision, and a little mystery that still makes humanity restless today. Part 2. How did they get the stone to the top of the sky? Just imagine, a stone block weighing tons, bigger than a buffalo, had to be lifted nearly 140 meters high, without a crane, without wheels, and without steel or cement. So, how? Did they use a kilometer-long incline? Or maybe each stone was pulled by a wooden pulley, and hundreds of people shouting in the sun? Some theories suggest that they built a spiral around the pyramid, gradually pulling it up as they built. Others say they used ancient hydraulic lifts, although no one has ever found real evidence. But the truth may be both simple and beyond our imagination. If you want to explore every detail, every technical hypothesis, along with 3D models and physical explanations, check out the video I made specifically for this topic. The detailed link is right below the description. A quiet night, a great question, and who knows? You might be the one who dreams of the answer. Part 3. The unimaginable tools of the Egyptians. Close your eyes and imagine yourself standing in a hot, sunny quarry 4,500 years ago. In front of you is a block of deep red granite, taller than a person, heavier than a herd of cows. You don't have an excavator, no electric drill. You only have in your hand a bronze hammer which looks like a pestle as heavy as a can of water, with a handle made of hard wood that has turned brown in the sun. Bronze, which is softer than iron, was still the strongest metal the Egyptians had at that time. And what helped them carve the stone was not metal, but another stone, harder than the dark gray dolerite, heavy, dense, and not fragile at all. They pounded, and pounded, one stroke at a time, in rhythm, on the same spot for days. Each stroke created a small dent. More dents formed a groove, and gradually the stone cracked. There was no noise from the machine, only the sound of the hammer hitting the stone. Knock, knock, resounding regularly like the heartbeat of a civilization. But pounding on the stone was only the beginning. How did the stone surface become so smooth? How did the blocks fit together so tightly that not a single hair could pass through them? The answer was Nile sand. Nile sand was not like sea sand. It was as fine as dust, mixed with tiny mineral crystals, like millions of microscopic blades waiting to wear down anything. The Egyptians took that sand, mixed it with water, and made a kind of grinding mud. Then they used long wooden sticks or leather, sometimes coarse woven cloth. to rub back and forth on the stone surface, like a sword sharpener sharpens a blade. No rush, no noise, just time. A block of stone took weeks, even months, to be ground flat as desired. But they were not impatient, because for the Egyptians, everything that lasts forever needed to be created with patience. They did not grind the stone with their bare hands. The Egyptians used hard wooden sticks, about 1.5 meters long, as thick as an adult thigh bone, smoothed and covered with rough cowhide on the contact surface. When it was necessary to smooth large stone surfaces, up to several meters long and shoulder high, they tied animal skins measuring 80 by 120 centimeters, stretched tightly onto a wooden frame like an ancient grinding board. Along with that is Nile sand mixed with water, thick like mud, poured onto the stone surface as a natural polishing layer. On each large stone block, there will be at least 3 to 4 strong men standing on both sides, pulling, pushing, in a rhythm like rowing a boat, the force going from the shoulders to the hands. With larger blocks over 3 meters long, sometimes up to 6 people need to grind at the same time, divided into 2 groups, each group in charge of half the surface, taking turns scrubbing from early morning to late afternoon. No flatness measuring machine, just skilled eyes, calloused hands, and the daylight reflecting on the stone surface. When the stone surface begins to sparkle slightly in the sun, that is a sign that it is smooth enough. But they don't stop there. They wiped off the mud, added new water, added sand, and continued. Some blocks took weeks to complete the cut. Some took half a month just to round the edges. When you look at the Great Pyramid of Giza today, remember, it wasn't technology that built it. It was bronze hammers, dolerite, Nile sand, and the belief that man could reach eternity with his bare hands. Part 4. The silent workers. Who are they? When you stand in the shadow of the Great Pyramid of Giza, what can make you speechless is not the height, but the feeling. Someone placed each of these stones by hand, not gods, not aliens, but real people, flesh and blood, like you and me. They are not engraved in history books. They do not have their own monuments, but they are the ones who made the eternal dream of the pharaohs come true. People used to think that the pyramids were built by slaves, but modern archaeology has overturned that. They discovered, next to the tombs of the pharaohs, there was a small cemetery of the builders. In it, there were bones carefully buried, food placed beside them, and even bronze tools still lying next to the hands of the deceased. Those people buried like relatives, not slaves, but they were skilled craftsmen, working with pride and faith that they were serving something sacred. They lived in villages near the construction site, were fed, and were given medical care when they were injured. The healed fractures tell the story. They worked in shifts, under the desert sun, pushing stones with their hands, lifting blocks with their shoulders, and using their hearts to build what humanity still calls a wonder. Each stone is the fingerprint of dozens of people. Each tower floor is a step of an anonymous team of workers. And when night falls, in the cool breeze from the Nile, they sit around the fire, eat a simple meal, and dream of completion. So the next time you look up at the pyramids, remember them, the silent craftsmen, because wonders do not come from magic. They come from human hands, and the dream of immortality. Eternity is not in stone, but in human memory. As the sun sets behind the desert, the pyramids are dyed a pale orange, as if they were falling asleep. But you know what? What is truly eternal is not the granite, not the height of 140 meters, not the inscriptions carved on the wall. It is the memory. It is the story you just heard. It is the image of people without names, without thrones, but who contributed to building something that the whole world must look up to. The ancient Egyptians believed that only when the name is remembered, the soul lives. That is why they carved names everywhere, to fight against the second death. the death of oblivion. And now you are thinking of them. You have just called their names, with imagination, with curiosity, with eyes following each stone they laid. Tonight, if you close your eyes, you can see them. A silent procession of people dragging stones in the desert. A young worker wiping his sweaty brow. A loud shout echoes in the wind. And in the distance, the silhouette of the pyramid, towering, majestic, silent as a promise. Not everything needs miracles. All it takes is people to believe and begin. Have you ever wondered? Who was the first person to draw straight lines in the desert? Who calculated every block of stone, every tilt, every ray of sunlight? That person was not Pharaoh. Not a slave, but a person. Standing between darkness and light, both an architect and a sage. Tonight, let's go back more than 4,500 years to find the face hidden behind the greatest wonder of the planet. Part 1. No signature, no blueprint. Who designed the greatest construction on the planet? Imagine yourself standing in front of the Great Pyramid of Giza, a block of stone nearly 140 meters high, standing firm for more than 4,500 years, amidst the yellow sand and desert wind. No cement, no crane, no wheels. And the strangest thing is, no one signed. There are no walls engraved with the architect's name. No blueprints, no construction logs. Just millions of giant stones, cut so perfectly that a thin sheet of paper would have trouble getting between them. Who created this marvel? Some say it was Imhotep, the wise priest, the first architect in human history whose name is recorded. But he lived centuries before the construction of the Giza pyramids. Others say it was a team of hundreds of talented craftsmen living in anonymity, working for decades under the supervision of royal officials. And some believe the design came from the gods. Could it be that an ancient knowledge, which we will never fully understand, is hidden in each stone? They left no message, but you can sense something. In the way the stones are laid out, aligned from base to top, in a ratio that baffles even modern architecture. Maybe tonight, when you fall asleep, imagine yourself walking up the steps of the Great Pyramid. Each step is an unanswered question. Each stone is a whisper from the past. And maybe, up there, under the starry Egyptian sky, you will hear the quiet voice of the designer, nameless, faceless. Only the great things they left for humanity. Imhotep, the first man to be worshipped as a god in the ancient world. There were people who lived forever, not because of power, but because of wisdom. And the name Imhotep, he who comes in peace, is one of those great symbols. Imhotep is not a pharaoh. He was not born into a noble family. But more than 4,600 years ago, during the reign of King Djoser of the third dynasty of ancient Egypt, Imhotep was a living phenomenon. The Egyptians honored him as high priest of the sun god, the king's vizier, the highest advisor, and especially the chief architect who designed the step pyramid at Saqqara, considered the predecessor of the Giza pyramid. He did something no one had ever thought of, building the king's tomb, not with mud bricks like the ancients, but with limestone, hard, heavy, eternal. Instead of burying the king in the ground, Imhotep built a structure that reached up to the sky like a bridge between the mortal world and the gods. But he was not just a pyramid builder. In ancient medical texts, Imhotep's name is mentioned as the father of Egyptian medicine. He is said to have written the first medical texts. He knew how to diagnose diseases by pulse, use herbs, and perform basic surgery. He was even called the Hippocrates of Egypt, although he lived nearly 2,000 years before Hippocrates. Centuries after his death, Imhotep was not forgotten like other officials. On the contrary, he was worshipped as a god, had temples built, statues carved, and people prayed to him as a god of healing, wisdom, and creativity. Even the later Greeks, The first philosophers and scientists mentioned Imhotep with admiration. But here's an interesting thing. Imhotep lived nearly 100 years before the era of the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. So, if not him, then who designed that massive structure? Why did no one leave a single inscription? Why was the designer's name swallowed by time? Perhaps the answer lies not in the blueprint, but in the way each stone was laid, by one hand, one mind, and one eternal belief. Emu, the man behind the impossible? If we had to assign a name to the most ambitious blueprint in human history, the Great Pyramid of Giza, many modern scholars would quietly whisper, Emu, not because he left behind a construction diary. There's no signature etched in stone, but the silent evidence surrounding him seems to speak louder than words. Emu, also known as Hemen, was a high-ranking official around 2570 BCE under the reign of Pharaoh Khufu. In ancient inscriptions, he bore many impressive titles. Vizier to the king, overseer of all royal works, and most intriguingly, supervisor of the king's pyramid construction. A simple title, yet profound in meaning. Only someone who controlled materials, manpower, and royal budget could have orchestrated such an impossible feat. But the most compelling clue lies beneath the desert sand. Near the base of the Great Pyramid, archaeologists discovered a large limestone tomb believed to belong to Emu. A luxurious tomb, built from the same type of stone as the pyramid itself, and carefully aligned to face its center. Inside the tomb stood a statue, life-sized, depicting him seated calmly, his gaze directed toward the pyramid. Etched into the stone was his title, Supervisor of the Construction of the Great Pyramid of King Khufu. Coincidence? Or perhaps a quiet declaration, hinting that he was the mind behind the miracle. We may never know if Emu personally sketched the plans, but it's clear he was the crucial link, the one who coordinated logistics, enforced discipline, and inspired thousands of workers across decades of construction. If this is true, then Emu was not just an architect. He was a visionary conductor, turning scattered stones into a perfect pyramid 140 meters high. And so, though his name may not echo loudly in history books, every block of the Great Pyramid still whispers his name through the wind silently, but never forgotten. Part 3. The Unknown Worker and the Solitude of Greatness. Imagine you are standing in the middle of Giza. The sun is burning hot above your head, and before you is a block of stone weighing tens of tons, aligned to the centimeter over 4,500 years ago. You look up and suddenly ask, who thought of this? Who directed thousands of people to move millions of stones? Who was the chief architect of this impossible thing? But you search and search, still can't find anyone's name. No inscriptions, no memorial tablets, just stone and silence. In the heart of the Great Pyramid, not a single line mentions designer. Unlike other temples, where the pharaoh's name is written in gold, here, there is only a perfect structure, as if arranged by the stars. Historians have put forward many hypotheses. It could have been Emu, a relative of King Khufu, who played an important role in the royal court. It could have been a council of architects, brilliant minds working behind the scenes. It could also have been someone never mentioned, because he chose to remain silent. But here's the thing. Did you know? In ancient Egypt, a skilled craftsman did not need to be called a genius, because for them, perfection was not about making a name. It was about serving the gods. They believed, when the last stone is in the right place, my name will live forever. Even if no one knows my name, the designer of the Great Pyramid may have lived a simple life, walking quietly, carrying in his head numbers, measurements, and secrets that have never been revealed. And then one day, when the work was completed, he retreated into the darkness. In the desert night, when everything was asleep, the wind still blew through the crevices of the rocks like a whisper. No matter who I am, As long as you look up at the pyramid, I am still alive. The reason, Giza. No text records the name of the architect, unlike the step pyramid at Saqqara, where Imhotep is clearly recorded as the architect of King Djoser. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the largest wonder, did not leave any ancient text, stela, or relief recording the name of the designer. No one can be sure that Hemiunu was the builder, although he had a tomb very close by and held the title of head of royal works. But most importantly, there is no direct evidence that he was the designer. Furthermore, the ancient Egyptians believed that buildings were for the worship of gods, not individuals. Therefore, in many periods, Egyptian architects and artisans did not leave their names on their buildings because they did not build for themselves or their reputation. They built for gods or for the pharaoh, who was considered the sun god. This caused many truly talented architects to fall into the shadows of history, leaving no trace of their identities. Therefore, we only see buildings without the names of their builders. Part 4. When engineers become anonymous, imagine you are standing in the twilight on the Giza Plateau. In the distance, the shadow of the Great Pyramid stretches out over the desert, like a whisper from the past. The time of Imhotep, its first builder, is gone. Now, before us lies a wonder whose designer is unknown. But perhaps that is the most amazing thing of all. In about 2600 BC, Pharaoh Khufu, also known as Cheops, ordered the construction of the world's largest pyramid. No one records the architect's name, no plaque in honor, only wind, stone, and the imprints of handprints in the narrow corridor. The few records from the 19th-20th centuries suggest that Hemiunu, a high priest, may have been the project manager. He lived right next to the construction site and was a relative of the king. But, again, no one is sure. Because in those days, fame belonged to the pharaohs and engineers were just silent servants of eternity. Close your eyes for a moment. You can hear the sound of chisels, hammers, and people shouting in the middle of the desert noon. You might see a group of engineers writing in red ink on the wall, calculating the tilt of each stone, measuring every square inch precisely. Not one genius, but a whole council of people whose names no one knows, but they wrote the wonder with sweat, mathematics, and faith. We often ask, who is the genius behind the pyramid? But sometimes, greatness does not come from one person, but from the harmony of thousands of people believing in something bigger than themselves. And that is what makes the pyramid not just a stone, but the immortal dream of an entire civilization. Part 5. The Nameless One, and the Lesson from the Desert. When the last rays of light fall on the top of the stone tower, when the Egyptian sky turns a strange purple blue, you can feel something very ancient, quietly breathing in the sand. Perhaps the person who designed the pyramid does not need to be remembered, because he or they never did it for glory. They did not seek medals. They did not leave a golden signature, just left a perfect shape that defies time. In the modern world, we often ask, who is behind that success? But perhaps the ancients taught us something else. Glory does not lie in being recognized, but in having truly created something meaningful. The Egyptians did not just build pyramids. They built a legacy with their whole lives, with calloused hands, with eyes looking to the sky, and hearts believing that beauty will last forever if we put our heart into each stone. And you know what? Even though we will never know the real name of the person who designed it, but every time we look up at the pyramid, we are whispering their name in silent admiration. Good night. If you are also quietly building your own pyramid, a dream, a project, or something that no one has seen, keep going. Because who knows? 5,000 years from now, that very thing will be the lighthouse in someone else's dream. We have just gone through a series of hypotheses, from bronze tools to the technique of sliding stones on wet sand, from teams of tens of thousands of people to the possibility of a lost civilization. But no matter which hypothesis, there are still unanswered questions. Why is the precision almost absolute? Why are the pyramids aligned with the stars? And most importantly, who really ordered them to be built? For what purpose? Could it be that the pyramids are not just tombs, but also a kind of map, a code, a message to the future? Or perhaps simply proof of the only undeniable thing. Human beings, in any era, have always been capable of doing the seemingly impossible. Sleep well in the world of mysteries still unsolved. Tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine yourself standing before the Great Pyramid of Giza. Desert winds brushing against ancient stones, while time whispers secrets that history has forgotten. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this journey. Sleep deeply, and we'll see you in the next ancient dream.